Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome. So our next presenter is Mr. Franky Carraras. He's come from UPT. He's going to be giving you, so I'm standing right in front of the screen here. He's going to be giving you a presentation on accident analysis and prevention regarding tandem fatalities and incidents. How many people in this room are tandem instructors? Quite a lot of you, very good. How many people are not, but interested in becoming a tandem instructor? Oh, you're very brave coming in this one, okay. Excellent. So I'm going to hand you over to Franky. Thank you very much.
Right.
Oh,
right. So, welcome from my side as well. My name is Franky Carraras, already mentioned. I started skydiving in '88, on the 8th of August, actually, easy to remember. So I became a tandem instructor early 1990, a tandem examiner 94, and I am running UPT tandem instructor examiner courses since 2010. I started issuing the international tandem fatality synopsis in 1995, when there were like 20 or 25 tandem fatalities in total, and kept it more or less current until today. So I've been asked by British Skydiving for this presentation, and I'm sponsored by UPT, so they actually paid my travel expenses to be here for you. I'm not contracted or employed by UPT, but as their tandem instructor examiner and course director, obviously, I'm in close contact with them and we work closely together. So beside that, I have a number of other tandem examiner ratings and other instructional ratings as well that are not of any importance for this presentation. It's kind of like based on tandem data, but it's not really a strictly tandem presentation. So if you are interested in any type of supportive safety actions that you might be able to imply or to set up for your own drop zone, this should be good for you as well. Right. So starting with some numbers on tandems. Tandem statistics, numbers is sometimes a dry topic anyway, but these are the numbers that we don't really have, right? So we don't really know how many tandem jumps are done per year, so you might have an idea what has been reported to British Skydiving. I kind of have an idea what's been reported to the German Parachute Association. I think UPT, for a number of years, they work with an estimate of 3 million tandem jumps a year internationally. Don't know how these numbers come together, but that's kind of like the assumption that we have. So we don't really know the total number of tandem jumps, and we don't even know exactly the total number of tandem instructors that we have. British Skydiving knows how many ratings they have out there. The local national federations, they know how much they have out there. UPT, USBA, they know how many ratings they have out there, but they don't really know how many have multiple ratings or other ratings. So there is not even like a good estimation on how many tandem instructors are around there worldwide. Yeah. What we do have, and I think that this number is probably correct, plus minus 1 or 2, rather plus, is the total number of tandem fatalities internationally since the event of tandem skydiving. So until today, there's 101 tandem accident that involves fatalities, at least one, sometimes is a double fatality, of course, with a total of 167 casualties since 1984, which is now, if you count the whole years, it's like 41 years in progress for tandem skydiving. The worst years that we ever had was 1993, so that's already a couple of decades ago, with 14 dead, and 2017 was 12 dead. So these were the real bad years. We did already also have no fatality years, which were like 84, 85, which were basically the first years of doing tandems at all, with a very, very, very low number of tandem rigs available, tandem instructors being trained, and tandem jumps being done in total. 99, 2001, 2010, and 2023. So every couple of years, there is actually a year where we mention to have 0 fatalities internationally. And if you look actually at the last period between September 22 and July 24, there's like almost 2 years, or 22 months, without a tandem fatality that we know of. Right? In 2024, we had 2 fatalities, one in June, one in August, in close order, one after the other. But, and both of them were very, very similar. I'll talk a bit about them later. So part of this reports, or of this synopsis, are the fatalities only from exit to landing, and sometimes not even in a direct relationship to the actual tandem jump. So if somebody had a heart attack, that might have happened anyway somehow, but it happened between exit and landing, then this is in the statistics. If somebody happened to have a heart attack in the airplane on the way up, or an airplane crash with the skydiving plane, that's not in the statistics. My personal guess is that would probably either double the numbers or even more. Because if we lose an airplane like the Fox Glacier incident in New Zealand a couple of years ago, there was like 6 tandem pairs, 12 people dead in one event, right? So that's not counting the airplane crashes. You won't be able to read this, just as an example. So I started this in 1995, probably not 100% complete, and I just list them by number here, date, where it occurred, and the country, and if there was video available to it somehow or not. And that's a list that is now 101 numbers long. My last update was from 2017. I do have all that information, so I'm in the process of updating that and making it available also in English, and because the original one was only in German. So as an example on how I was listing these things, so this is an older one from Switzerland. I usually just put a number to it, a date, the location, and whether it was a double or single fatality. Then sometimes about the tandem instructor, if he was properly trained and had a current rating. That was not always the case. Maybe even the jump experience, the number of tandems, and maybe how many tandems on that particular day. The plane that was used, so the aircraft, and the exit altitude in meters and feet. Even though in most of the cases that has really no direct influence on what happened, so it's just out of interest. There are a couple of cases where we had aircraft hang-ups or where the aircraft had something to do with what happened, but there was maybe like 2 or 3 times the case only. So this is just as a sample how I'm trying to describe it. I'm reading this one. Tandem jump went uneventful until main canopy deployment. Witnesses reported a fast spinning main canopy or malfunction that looked initially like it could become controllable, but closer to the ground it started to rotate again. This might have been caused by 1 or 2 collapsed end cells. So there is just reporting what we know and very little speculation in what we don't know. Sometimes it does not really give you an exact course or even a proper conclusion, just a description. So you can make up your mind yourself, whatever you think could have happened there. Tandem instructor and student got severely injured on impact. The student died at the accident scene. The tandem instructor died the following night in the hospital. So this is just the outcome in the brutal words of it. This next 2 slides would be the last 2 from last year. So in both cases, no, in this case was a single fatality. The tandem student was killed in Belgium last year. Basically, a tandem went quite normal until the final approach, where the tandem instructor already had a proper setup for the landing and got hit by a dust devil very, very low to the ground. The dust devil basically spun the tandem pair around and slammed them into the ground with the relevant or respective accidents that were happening. So in this case, the passenger more or less died on the accident scene, and the tandem instructor was taken to a hospital and will probably be recovering fully. Factors here were winds were 10 knots or southwest. There was some clouds and there was some turbulence at a higher altitude, but not in the landing area present or that could be expected. It was a Sigma with an Icarus 364. The tandem instructor and tandem students' total weight was reported as only 140, 150 kilos. That's pretty lightweight for the whole pair. With the 364 being one of the bigger canopies, so a very, very low wing loading might have been a factor here. There were, again, no reports of before and after. I think there were like other tandems in the same load, and the tandem pair before and the tandem pair after landed without any incidents and without any problems whatsoever. And there are some eyewitnesses, and there was video for this one. The next one, not even a month later in Paris, California, double fatality, pretty much the same story. There were dust devils then present. There was like around noonish, 1 o'clock or so in the afternoon as it happened. And there were dust devils just building when the tandem canopies approached. And there was like one dust devil that was in a more dusty area visible to the tandem instructor, and she actually managed to avoid this one and was hit by a second dust devil on a grassy spot that was hardly to be seen, or not to be seen from her point of view, and that hit her, and pretty much the same thing happened then in Belgium. Again, both were actually transported to hospital, and the tandem instructor died later in the hospital, and the tandem student didn't make it even to the hospital. In that case, also both tandem instructor and tandem student were lightweight ladies that were reported as a rather light load on the canopy. The Sigma 370 also being a bigger canopy for those conditions and the weight. Course would be meteorological conditions, in that case dust devils, and eyewitnesses in video. So this is the way I would report these things in that summary. I'll be giving you the total statistics in a moment, but you could say that there is like 3-4 different eras in tandem fatality history, you could say. The first one being evolution. Tandem was brand new. Nobody had too much of experience with it. And you could say that the rules of tandem skydiving as we know them were written in blood, right? So everything that we do have now, no canopy relative work, certain requirements to accompany a tandem pair as a relative work jumper or as a videographer, those were established after there was an accident, right? So certain rules just came in as a result. Also, the Cypress, or let's say a working AED, has been, let's say, marketed after 1991. So there it became a factor for later. Actually, you see quite a drop in fatalities after everybody had a mandatory AED. So that's another thing. The second era I would call the era of complacency, but pilot error, drop zone culture, that plays a role with that. and we talk about improper harness gear up and donning, or bad or lacking equipment checks or no equipment checks, and improper procedures, improper emergency procedures, and then canopy, flight errors, hook turns, low turns, etc. So this was a time when the equipment got safer, but it looked like the tandem instructors were getting unsafer because everybody had a false sense of security because nothing happened. That's the general problem that we have with all these safety precautions. If we are really, really safe, then after a while we get really negligent for safety precautions because nothing happens ever until something happens, and then everybody is really startled again and looks more for safety. So it's kind of like a wave that is the hardest to battle when nothing's happening, right? So when we are really safe, it's harder to stay safe than if something happens and we want to become safe again afterwards, right? The last era I would call like freak accidents and some medical issues. So these are probably the accidents that could not be prevented. I would say in hindsight of all those fatality reports, if we had the equipment that we have today, the rules we have today, the training that we have today, if we had this from day one, I would say probably 70–80% of those fatalities would have been preventable. Some of them would not. So we had a couple of drownings that are maybe an unlucky incident or so. Then we had some medical issues like a heart attack or like a thrombosis or something like that, that were factors that probably could not have prevented. And then maybe some of those, let's say, meteorological freak accidents like last year, they would probably not be preventable at all. So looking at, I think this might be a little bit better visible. So forget about the small numbers. You don't really need to read them. It's just kind of like if you look at the stacks there. So the highest number in 1993 was 7 accidents that we ever had. And then again, we had like the first era. That was this part here, up here, the first until maybe 1998 or so. That is development of tandem rules, equipment, knowledge, training, and so on. Then we had the AD coming in, safety relevant things. Then this build up was kind of like until 2009 was maybe complacency to a big part. And then we have all kinds of strange things. You know, this is a fairly constant picture for 40 years. Again, what we don't have are the underlying information on numbers of tandem equipment, tandem instructors, tandem jumps done internationally. Right? If we look at 1985, 0 tandems in Germany. 84, 85, 86, we had like 2 tandem systems in Germany and 4 tandem instructors that were operating them. I have a list of all 260 tandem jumps that were done in those 2 years. Right? So if you look at this today, there are drop zones that do more than that on a weekend now. Right? So if you look at the basic numbers, you would probably stay quite low there and you would shoot them up to outer space somewhere. So you would have huge, huge, huge numbers. At the same time, we have kind of like this picture. So in conclusion, tandem jumping gets safer and safer and safer constantly since 40 years in a dramatic scale. So the improvement of tandem safety is huge if you look at it from this point of view. So I picked this era a bit arbitrarily, 16, 17 years, 42 fatalities, just picked out some of the typical courses, you could say, which are pretty much all human factors, some of them non-preventable in the end maybe, but we have improper equipment checks that played a role 6 times, hook turn, low turns in this whole area twice. Yeah. We had like 4 of them in 2022, so hook turns were a big thing later. We actually had 2 occasions where passengers got lost. 13 where improper procedures operation had to play a role, or hand cam, video cam had a role either as a collision with a videographer or being distracted or entangled with a hand cam as part of the accident in some way. Side spins, at least 2, maybe 3, that's kind of like unclear. And adverse meteorological conditions, 7 times. And for these, I kind of like wrote in brackets improper weather decisions, question mark, you know. So sometimes in some of these reports it's not clear whether this was like a dust devil freak accident like the one we had or the 2 we had last year. It's more like these were bad conditions and people jumped anyway. So that's a different story, right? So if the weather is just not good enough to safely do tandems, then you shouldn't do them, obviously. So in these cases, it was more like improper decisions before. I would not say that for last year's fatalities. There were 2 heart attacks. Obviously, they could not be prevented by anything that the tandem instructor could have done. Question?
Just on that one, that is actually 5% of the total 42. Do you know, with those in countries that have any medical self-declaration screening or require medical certificates for people with issues, do you know what countries they were in?
So the question was, I repeat this for the recording, about the medical background that was notable. I don't know. If it's in the US, they either have the waiver where they have like the statement if they have any infirmities or not.
Do you know what countries they were in?
I could look it up, but it's internationally. So I would say in generally the majority of fatalities happen in the US, but it is because that's where the most of that happens, you know, and that's not really like true in general. So statistics is always statistics. There are some numbers that are not really representative. It is only 101 cases. So statistically, the number is not enough to say anything about it, right? There is no fatality that I'm aware of where it was a known factor that that the person has had any type of disability, or like later on Neil will be talking about special needs tandems or something. None of that is on the list. You know? It's probably also because these type of tandems, they get a lot of attention by the people doing it, and they're most experienced guys. Right? So I can tell you in general that there were like 2 tandem instructors that were also tandem examiners that had heart attacks as the guys in the rear. And one of them was Coast Guard Reserve, typical 56 years old, maybe a little bit over, kind of like my constitution. And he had a heart attack on the way down, right? The instructor, yeah. That would be actually the best advertisement for tandem that you could ever had, because the guy was really experienced examiner for multiple manufacturers. He jumped out, he set the drogue, he died on a heart attack. He went down, the AED opened the reserve that he packed himself, and the tandem pair landed without a scratch on the passenger and on a pasture somewhere, and she walked away without anything. Imagine any type of aviation activity that you could have. You have no idea, you don't do anything, you just go for the ride, your pilot in command dies, and you walk away without a scratch. That only happens in tandem skydiving, you know. So that was one case. There was one guy in Australia that did the jump. He gave it actually as a present for himself on his 70th birthday, and he died on the way down on a heart attack.
So he was the passenger?
The passenger. So the tandem landed as planned on the beach. The tandem instructor tried to give the guy CPR and resuscitate him without any success. And that was like, so we have maybe 2 or 3 passengers. They were a little bit older, but not necessarily in a medical critical condition. Actually, I have to correct myself what I said before. There was one incident with a special needs tandem, and that was the one person that fell out of the harness because of the improperly fitted harness for that particular jump. You know. So there's one of them is like this. Okay, so picking the last 5 years, and 2025 is really at the moment a strong hope that we are continuing like before without any fatalities. So this is really 2020 and 24, so 12 fatalities that we are looking in here. And we got the list down to hook turn, low turns, 4 improper procedures, another 4 aircraft hang up that might not have been preventable. One time the hand cam was a contributing factor, and we have the 2 dust devils that I think could not be prevented. And then one that we don't really know anything about it. There's still an ongoing preliminary investigation. It's actually the one in Germany. So there, the tandem instructor survived with heavy injuries and severe injuries, and the tandem passenger, which was a 14-year-old, got killed on that jump. And so there's also no other medical implications before. So this was more or less the tandem data as a background. Now we get to the general safety ideas part of that presentation. You probably are already familiar with the problem iceberg, or with the DuPont accident pyramid, which is not necessarily a thing that is pertinent to tandem skydiving or skydiving in general. So this actually works for pretty much every working environment or any activity in general. And the finding or the idea is that if we see a fatality, that's something that everybody sees because it's a very, publicly known thing, so you hear about it. If somebody breaks a leg on a tandem skydive outside my local area, I wouldn't know. You know, if somebody gets eaten by a shark in Australia, I probably maybe hear it somewhere in the news. If somebody dies in a tandem fatality, I'll probably get multiple emails and notices from a couple of people within the next 20 hours or so. So people call me, have you heard, have you seen, do you know anything about it? So this is always the top that is visible to most of us, right? So the idea is that for every fatality, you will have a certain factor, and the numbers differ. Some people say it's like 10 times, 10-fold, sometimes it's 4 or 5-fold, sometimes, but it's a factor, it's a relevant factor, right? So for every fatality, there are probably 30 severe accidents, injuries, and equipment damage. These are also the things that you will hear in your national reportings, like the stuff that Kevin reported earlier today here. 300 minor accidents and incidents, then 3,000 near misses or close calls with no or minor consequences. And then there's a huge amount of mistakes or unsafe actions or rule breaking, weather conditions that you ignore. That could be behavior, equipment, weather, whatsoever, which mostly either no consequences at all or not overlooked or not reported, not even realized by the person who just got away with it. So this is actually the lower part, is the part that we need to attack, that we can attack to increase safety for everybody. So that's the goal that we have, where we can maybe focus on our measures on. Are you familiar with the term normalization of deviance? People who have never heard the term? Okay, so most people have it. So I'll keep this one really short. I go with the definition. That's, if you look at Wikipedia, that's what you find. American sociologist Diane Vaughan said that's the process in which deviance from correct or proper behavior or rule becomes culturally normalized. Or in other words, if nothing happens, I continue my mistakes, and if there's not like a direct fatality coming from it, I can ignore it and continue in the easier way that I presume is for me much more comfortable than sticking to the rules or taking the necessary precautions. So the normalization of deviance is something that we can look at as how to get people not to do it, how to go back to the original rule or the original procedure and not to the deviated one. Any ideas how we apply this in our normal life already? Emergency procedure review, for example, right? So if you review your procedures, you would find this is still the way how we do it, right? Or there has been a mistake that kind of like got in somehow. Or just by peer pressure drops on culture. So everybody's doing the right thing, but there's the one guy that kind of like tries to be smarter than everybody else. And then sometimes we just tell them, like, no, this is not how we want to do our canopy approaches, right? This is how we want to fly our pattern here. So there is some correction on the way, but in some areas, and that's part of the whole, let's say, skydiver society, it's overlooked or at least accepted. And that's always the hard part, to step in there and stop it. So far the conclusions are, whenever you hear about a fatality, or whenever you have all the reports or investigations afterwards, you figure out that everybody has seen a part of that accident already. So, yeah, that's how he did it. That's how he always did it, right? So he got away with it 100 times before it actually hit him, right? And the other part, the second part, is obviously when you think something is wrong, speak up and help avoiding those accidents. So the general thing, when you see something, say something, right? It's like, who has been in a plane on the way up and saw somebody else's chest strap not being properly closed? Okay, or let's say, who has been in the loading area and seen something on somebody else's equipment that's not in order? Okay, a little bit more than that. So that already speaks for your drops on culture and for your way of doing things, if you spot it before you actually get on the plane, right? So if I would be in a plane and somebody across would be sitting there with an open chest strap, there's no way I would not mention it to the guy, right? There's no way I would say, it's like, well, that's probably the way he skydives. No, so I would say, like, hey, guy, look at your chest strap, right? So if he's doing it, okay. You know, what if you would have something like, nah, that's going to be fine, I'll do it on the way down. There would be some reaction, right? So that's unheard of, story like that. So why don't we do the same thing for other stuff? You know, just because that person is more experienced than myself, or because I hope it's going to be fine, because it has been fine a couple of times. So that is requires a change in attitude here. So safety, the definition of safety, especially also in aviation, is the absence of risk. If you have no risk, we are safe. So obviously we want to only talk about risks that are, or measures that are technically and economically achievable. So for us as skydivers, to be 100% safe, if we don't jump, we will be 100% safe, right? But that's not the goal, so we are not going there. So no jump, no risk is not an option for us. So we look at mitigating risks and maybe reducing risk as good as we can with the measures that make sense for our community, right? So in most of those, let's say, aviation safety pictures, the desired limit, or what we call safety, is 1 fatality per 1 million, let's call it events. In our case, it would be skydives, or it could be just tandem skydives, or it could be glider plane rides, or it could be riding in a train, riding in a bus, riding in a car. Whatever our means of transportation there is, that would be 1 fatality per 1 million would be regarded still as safe. So are we safe? These are numbers that I have for Germany, and this would be, since 2010, we had an average of 12 fatalities, plus minus 10 is depending on which year and how you read the statistics, per 1 million skydives. Yeah? If you look at glider flights, that is higher. If you look at motor planes, that's much higher. So skydiving is already one of the safest aviation activities compared to others. You know? The numbers that we have are stagnant since 2000. So we don't really get skydiving any more safer than what we already achieved. And the measures sometimes that sound reasonable, they do not really necessarily increase the overall safety or lead to less accidents. So that is probably something that the rule makers always need to reflect when they come up with restrictions that skydivers usually don't really like. You know? And then the question is, does it do the job? I have 2 examples. For example, New Zealand, they board and load the aircraft based on the weight and balance chart. So they actually put the actual weight of the tandem instructor and the weight of the actual tandem student, and the computer figures out which position they sit in. So if they jump first or last. From your personal experience, let's talk about a Skyvan or a pack or a caravan. Does it really make a difference where you put the heavier or no, not really, right? So the result is you put the heaviest tandem passengers next to the pilot because of weight and balance, and the light tandem pairs you put closer to the door. So flying over the spot, flying over the drop zone, the light guys jump out first, and then the heavy guys. Is that a good plan? No, you do it actually the opposite around, right? Because otherwise you would pass the other guys on the way down, or you need to overtake, or the last guys are the heaviest one with the least canopy ride that are the furthest out, right? So this is one thing where a rule is meant to create safety, but it actually doesn't, right? There's another one that is, let's say, questionable to a part, is like in the UK, I think it's mandatory to have tandem passengers fully hooked up and ready to jump before takeoff, right? Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So if you had like a boarded takeoff, right? Or you had like a crash landing after takeoff or so, those connections could be making the difference of one of the two getting out safely while the other one might be injured, right? So if we crash and I'm dead and my passenger isn't, now he kind of like has to drag my dead cadaver out of the plane somehow, even maybe injured himself or so, right? So that is not, that's not something that increases safety. So it's a rule that's been made for a certain reason, but in a different scenario, it might actually be quite the opposite. Right? So, spoiler alert for later, more rules, regulations, laws, accident reports, reporting systems, whatever we have, safety letters, briefings, keep safety on the current level, but do not really increase it any further. So in the newer terms of, let's say, safety sciences, this type of rulemaking or this type of approach is we call safety 1. So safety 1 and safety 2 later on. So what is safety 1? Safety 1 is top-down, accident investigation and reports that you get into the system. They will be looked at by experts, and the results will lead to improvement or new procedures, new SOPs, new changed emergency procedures, rules, regulations, whatsoever. And you could you could call it reactive. So something happened, so you do something about it. It's not proactive. It's not like you're not trying to look at it from like what could happen and how would I improve it. It's always like, okay, something happened, so we need to do something about it. You know? And then again, you focus on a desired effect. You must make sure that the negative effects are not overlooked that could result from the same thing. And I already talked about the examples here. Safety 2 is really what is discussed more recently. More recently, I mean the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, so it's not a new thing, but it's a bottom-up approach for more proactive or preventive safety that the actual individual, the skydiver, instructor, tandem instructor, looks at potential risks and tries to deal with them by certain measures that he would come up with and maybe discuss it within their community. Other things that you might have heard in that context is threat and error management, organizational safety, that's usually workplace stuff, and a general safety or risk consciousness in the population, if you put it in that way. You know. The little bit of a problem with that is that the more experienced you are, the better trained, the more knowledge you have, the better you would be able to go that way. The less experienced they are, the more you are relying on somebody else keeping you safe, which is you instructors keeping your students safe, because you know what could happen and they don't really know at the moment, right? So it's a matter of communication is a critical factor here, with the drop zone culture, the role models, the instructors being role model for the skydivers being role models for the students. That is usually something that, especially here in Britain, you always have been, let's say, like traditionally, historically, very good at. Right? So it's kind of like a leading nation when it comes to that. Still, things sometimes happen. So safety management systems that there's reporting systems, different ones. The airlines and companies, they have something like this is called a CIRS, a critical incident reporting system. In Germany, we have the civil, that is incident reporting form with an FAI standard. You have the same thing here in Britain. It's called the CHIRP, the Confidential Human Factors Incident Reporting Program. Are you aware about this? Everybody is? Okay. So there's a link to that on the British Skydiving website. And the reporting for that one is always independent from British Skydiving, and it's anonymous as well. So it's a confidential site where you can report things, and hopefully those findings will lead to a result that increases safety in any form. So that would be more safety 1 style, and safety 2 style is building knowledge and awareness in your local community. That would be running safety days, seminars. This event, for example, is a good example. The training that you do in general, EP reviews, emergency drills that you conduct with your instructors, your students, your maybe normal skydivers, and a mentoring program where you look just after each other, right? So that's just a little bit about the typical reporting system. Should be without sanctions, because if you know you're getting punished, you're more reluctant to report something. If you know that reporting frees you from any bad results, then you're more likely to do that. Anonymous is fine. Voluntary is obviously something that you need to do. Independent from hierarchy. Analysis through a team of experts is critical. Prompt feedback and implementation of reactions, changes, if possible or found. And then obviously it needs to be oriented to the system you're working in, and simple is great. So that could help you improve the culture in your area that you're working with. Maybe reduce or even avoid repeat mistakes. So you've already learned from somebody else's, and increase your knowledge about the topic. Still wouldn't help you if you just ignore that, or if you're not built for that type of safety consciousness. Right? Let's put it that way. Crew resource management is a typical safety 2 approach. Again, when I look for sources and who invented it, I always end up with some British guy. I don't know why. So this has actually been established by former Royal Air Force and Borg pilot already in '69. He started actually the term, so he coined the term crew resource management. Crew resource management is a set of training procedures for use in environments where human error can have devastating effects. Basically, that is cockpit communication, but it could also be drop zone and team and load communication, and the instructor with the pilot, the tandem instructors with each other, and all this type. So the key words here are interpersonal communication between the participants, and then leadership and decision making. That's the key. So if you identify any let's say lacks in these areas, this is where you can approach a more safe operation. So this is more or less the summary of it. Safety 1, learning from accidents. It works great, but only to a certain point. So we probably never get 100% safety. We already have lesser accidents because of it, and then lesser accidents we can be warned by, or that we can learn from, means that at a certain point there is not much more to gain. Safety 2 is an organized custom fit thing for smaller groups, and usually everybody can be more easily motivated to look out for their own safety. It's kind of like a given thing. You want to survive this and you want to be safe, you don't want to have an accident, so everybody's for it. And then you just need to find a way to get there. Who has never heard about the reason model? So, okay. So the reason model, named after Dr. James Reason, he invented that, University of Manchester, UK, in 1990 already, is also known as the Swiss cheese model, right? So what this is trying to visualize is like all of what we are doing is following certain procedures, we're using certain equipment, and each of these things might be 90% safe, but there might be some small stuff that is not 100% safe, or that we sometimes neglect. Maybe the rubber bands are worn out and then I have a line dump, then I have a hard opening or whatever. On equipment, on a preparation, I don't really have a plan, or I don't have reviewed my emergency procedures. So there's a lot of things that are involved. This is just a safety poster from the Australian Parachute Federation. That is at least 20, 30 years old, I don't know, but still current today. So they gave the example with preparation, equipment, skill, and then whatever backups you have, RSLs, ADs, reserves, and canopy handling. And usually if something happens, it does not need to lead to a fatality or an accident or something, so sometimes you get away with it. But if all those cheese slices align in a very, very unfortunate way, so all the holes are kind of like aligning on the same thing. Say again?
2 o'clock session in conference suite 2.
Right.
Reserved.
Okay, so
Pilot shoot ground assessment unfortunately has been cancelled. Lucy Mancy has very kindly
Leave that
offered
one.
to run a informal Q&A session following up from her packing and basic equipment knowledge in conference suite 2 at 2 o'clock, if anybody would like to join. Thank you.
right. So if those cheese slices align in a very unfortunate way, then we might just go right through it and end up with an accident or even a fatality, right? So for us, what can we do at home is, like, for us it's important to identify our stack of cheese slices. So we need to look at where we have problems or where we might not be quite on top of everything, and then define goals or actions to change these or to mitigate these risks, and then maybe control if these mechanisms actually worked or not, right? So just put out a few examples from another safety meeting where people try to kind of like come up with their own issues that they have. So maybe somebody found that they want to have better communication with a pilot about the spot. So find a plan on how to do that and how to manage it for your personal drop zone. Some people say like there's a lack of knowledge or instruction in some areas, so they want to schedule more education, safety days, training events on a regular basis. Some need to review the emergency procedures more often or more intensively, so just plan it on regular events. And then there's some basic stuff like problems with the landing area or with landing injuries, and they just need to mow the lawn, fill the holes, remove the obstacles or whatever is necessary to have a nicer landing area. And other overlooked equipment issues like somebody forgot to close their chest strap, so come up with the body checks that everybody gets checked by somebody else before they board the aircraft. So it could be very simple solutions to very simple common problems that makes everybody safer if you're aware of these problems and if you try to fix them. And then in the end always reevaluate whether your measures are actually doing the job or not. Right? Any questions, comments at this time?
Yeah, one thing yeah, you mentioned about our system of hooking the students up, we call them students, before we take off. And we looked at that when we started doing tandems in 84, 85, when it was just a few of us and we put the rules and regulations together. And the reason we came up with that decision, we were looking at the balance of probability. Now, the chances of an aircraft crashing just after takeoff is very high. We're all in the aircraft together and we're sat down, and we have more chance there, if tandem instructors think about it, and I teach that on my tandem courses, that if we have a low altitude where we're not going to get out, we're going to have to land with the aircraft, then we may have time to undo the top hooks and the side bands. We may. Mm-hmm. We may not. But the priority being there is that we're all bunched together because we have our brace, brace, brace position for a crash landing. If we're at a certain altitude where we need to get out because it's not necessarily a catastrophic incident, but we need to get out, we haven't got time to hook them up and to get out. We may be able to do it on one hook. Mm-hmm. I will give you a prime example that happened to me at an American drop zone many years ago. I know we were booked for time, but I need to get this out. We had a bunch of normal skydivers and about 6 or 7 tandem instructors. I was the only British one, and I knew the drop zone owner, and I've got my USPA rated. I hooked my student up, and the rest were saying what? And I said, this is the way we do it. And my student, who happened to be a British guy, was more than happy. We had actually an engine failure at about 2,000 feet. All the individuals got out. I was the only tandem instructor to be able to get out that aircraft and pull my reserve. Mm-hmm. And we landed. Mm-hmm. The rest of the guys had to land with the aircraft, and the pilot wanted them out, and they were too low to get out. They could not get them hooked up. So we're always looking, the balance of probability, if I'm at an altitude where I can get out, I don't have to worry about hooking them up. If I'm crashing, I want them tight to me, but I may have a chance to get the hooks off, so if it is on fire and we are conscious, at least we can get out. That's why we came to that decision.
Right. So the thing with all these regulations or measures are you are looking at a certain risk, and then obviously you need to weigh those risks, right? So, and you kind of like, you pick one risk over the other, either by likeliness or by severity. So when you make those regulations, you have a certain area in focus, but it might have a negative effect in another. So, and maybe you just rather take this risk over the other, you know, and that's why you come up with that decision, right? So it's, for me, it's not a, other areas have this too, you know, so it's not like a only British thing, but it has disadvantages down the road in certain areas, or equipment donning, harness donning, landing accidents in the end. Yeah? So there were some factors to it. But then this is the re-evaluation part of it, right? So you said like, okay, we want to avoid this issue. That's why we do this. And it helps us in 90% of the cases, but there are some cases where it might be the different or the negative effect. You know, is it worth it? Yes. Okay, then stick with it. You know, is it not worth it? Then maybe do something else, right? So there's always a typical ideal process of doing certain things, and then you mitigate for certain things. Like if I will be taking off with a helicopter, I'm completely ready to jump from before even, like I get in, I get ready before we take off, right? If I have like a very tiny 206 with like 3 tandems in it, everything's crowded, I get ready on the ground. If I have like a caravan where I have lots of space, I might do it maybe at 500 meters or whatever. So you have your local regulations that fit best for your operations. Right? Sometimes you have national regulations that are good for some things and not so good for other things. So I'm just saying, if you have certain risks identified, if that needs re-evaluation or if it needs rule changing, do it. If not, or if your assessment is a different one, then stick with it. So just keep your eyes open for anything that might happen or that you learn from accident reports, and identify the typical issues that you might have in your personal area. So was not meant to say something negative about.
No, I didn't mean it as a negative.
I was explaining why you did it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've got more chance with them. This is the way we look at it.
And what you said was the best solution for you, right? Okay. Other questions? I went a little bit over time, but yay! All right. Thanks.